The Las Vegas Raiders have a lot of big decisions to make this offseason. Today, I want to talk about 5 free agents they should definitely consider. These players could help improve the team in key areas. Of course, the Raiders won't be able to sign all 5, but they'll likely bring in at least one key free agent, probably someone in the $10 to $12 million range, depending on the player. Last season, the Raiders signed Christian Renz, which made a big difference on the defensive line. Unfortunately, injuries kept the unit from reaching its full potential. This year, if the team can add just 1 or 2 key pieces and solve the quarterback situation, they could have a strong season. Before we get into the list, I want to clarify that we won't be discussing quarterbacks. There are free agents available, like Sam Darnold and Jameis Winston, and some players may be released or traded, like Aaron Rodgers or Matthew Stafford. However, since quarterback is such an unpredictable position, we won't be focusing on that today. Instead, we'll look at other areas the Raiders need to improve to compete for a Super Bowl. One important position to address is right tackle. Looking at the Raiders' current roster, DJ Glaze has potential at that spot. However, he hasn't fully proven himself yet. He hasn't shown that he's the long-term answer, but he also hasn't shown that he isn't. Since Glaze was a third-round pick, he doesn't have the same job security as a first-rounder, so the team needs to consider their options. Finding quality tackles isn't easy, but one possible free agent target is Cam Robinson from the Jacksonville Jaguars, who most recently played for the Minnesota Vikings. He's not a top 10 tackle, but he's a solid and experienced player who still has room to improve. The Vikings traded for him after losing a starter, but they likely won't have the money to re-sign him. Robinson will probably earn between $12 to $15 million, which could be a great deal for the Raiders. If the Raiders sign Robinson, he could take over at right tackle, while DJ Glaze could move inside to guard. That could be a win-win situation for the team. While Glaze showed promise last season, the Raiders must remember that offensive tackles play a crucial role in protecting the quarterback. They need to carefully decide if they're comfortable going into the season with Glaze as their starter, or if they should bring in a more proven player like Robinson. If DJ Glaze turns out not to be a reliable right tackle, the Raiders could face a big problem. New head coach Chip Kelly runs a different offensive scheme, one that relies on 5-man protection more often. If Glaze struggles, the team won't be able to make a midseason adjustment easily. That's why General Manager Tom Telesco needs to think carefully about the offensive line as the draft and free agency approach. Who will be the key players anchoring the line? How can the Raiders strengthen this unit? Cam Robinson remains a strong option for the Raiders at right tackle. However, another important area the team must consider is its defensive line. Despite dealing with injuries last season, the Raiders still did a solid job pressuring opposing quarterbacks. Defensive coordinator Rob Leonard played a role in that, but the team also has talented pass rushers. The Raiders have a history of finding and developing players who may not have thrived elsewhere, and they could continue that trend this offseason. One move that could take the Raiders' defense to the next level is signing Osa Odigizua, a standout defensive tackle from the Dallas Cowboys. Last season, Odigizua ranked third in total pressures among defensive tackles, recording 7 sacks, 14 quarterback hits, and 60 total pressures, trailing only Chris Jones and Zach Allen. Adding him alongside Max Crosby and newly signed Christian Wilkins could make the Raiders' defensive front one of the best in the league. The Raiders also have pending free agents like Adam Butler and Malcolm Kunsey. Instead of paying Kunsey, the team could invest in Odigizua. Kunsey won't come cheap. Pass rushers like him don't sign for $5 million. They demand $15 million or more. So the Raiders must decide, would they rather keep Kunsey, who is a solid edge rusher, or bring in Odigizua, a top-tier interior pass rusher? Of course, Kunsey has been a key player for the Raiders, and it would be tough to let him go. But if the Raiders signed Odigizua, they could build an elite defensive line. Pairing him with Wilkins and Crosby would create an almost unstoppable pass-rushing unit. The Raiders could also re-sign Butler for depth and draft another edge rusher if they let Kunsey walk. Luckily, this draft class has plenty of talented pass rushers. If the Raiders want to go that route, they could target players like Abdul Carter, James Pierce Jr., or Michael Williams. Even in the second round, they could find impact players like Georgia's Jalen Walker or Mike Green. If the Raiders successfully upgrade their defensive line, opposing offenses would struggle to block them. Even last season, when Butler and Kunsey were healthy, the defensive line showed flashes of dominance. Imagine how much stronger they could be with another top-tier pass rusher added to the mix. As we move forward, another player the Raiders should seriously consider is a familiar face, former Raider Amari Cooper. The veteran wide receiver is a pending free agent after being traded from the Cleveland Browns to the Buffalo Bills. Unfortunately, he struggled this past season, but it's hard to say if that was entirely his fault. The Browns had major quarterback issues, with Deshaun Watson missing time and Jameis Winston stepping in at times. Then, after being traded to Buffalo, Cooper still didn't find much success. However, one bad season doesn't define a player. Just a year ago, Cooper put up 1,250 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns. The season before that, he recorded 1,160 yards and 9 touchdowns. He has been a consistently productive receiver, and he could be a great fit for the Raiders' offense. While Cooper is not necessarily a traditional X receiver, the Raiders are in a unique situation. With rookie tight end Brock Bowers expected to demand double teams, the offense could use another reliable target. Cooper, even at 30 years old, still runs crisp routes and creates separation. He could be a perfect number, 2 receiving option for the Raiders, complementing Bowers while also pairing well with Jacoby Myers and tight end Michael Mayer. Some fans might wonder why the Raiders should go after Cooper instead of a bigger-name free agent like T. Higgins. The reality is, Higgins isn't a realistic option. The Cincinnati Bengals have already stated their intention to use the franchise tag on him, and if they don't, they'll likely sign him to a long-term deal. In contrast, Cooper is a true free agent and could be one of the best available wide receivers on the market. Other potential options include Stephon Diggs and DeAndre Hopkins, but outside of those names, there aren't many top-tier receivers expected to hit free agency. Bringing Cooper back to Las Vegas could be a great move. He knows the franchise, he still has a few productive years left, and he would immediately improve the Raiders' passing attack, regardless of who ends up playing quarterback. Now, shifting back to the offensive line, another name worth considering is Mekhi Becton, who most recently played for the Philadelphia Eagles. Becton is well known around the league, and while he isn't a perfect player, he has proven he can be a high-level offensive lineman. Yes, he has struggled at times, particularly against speed rushers, but he has also shown flashes of elite potential. The most intriguing part? Becton is still only 25 years old. For a team like the Raiders, looking to solidify the offensive line for years to come, signing a young, talented lineman like Becton could be a smart investment. The Raiders have a chance to upgrade their offensive line without breaking the bank, and one potential target is Mekhi Becton. Compared to someone like Trey Smith, who has multiple years of success and will likely command anywhere between 18 to 22 million, Becton could be signed for a much more reasonable deal. He would probably earn something in the range of $10 to $14 million, similar to what Damian Lewis received from the Carolina Panthers last year, around $12 to $13 million. Becton's health has been a concern, which may keep his price lower, but his talent is undeniable. If the Raiders are committed to DJ Glaze at right tackle, they could bring in Becton and plug him in at right guard, which would immediately help stabilize the offensive line. The reality is that the Raiders need 2 new starting guards. The current group simply isn't good enough, based on both tape and last season's performance. Offensive linemen generally fall into 2 categories: people movers, players who create space and push defenders backward, or people holders, guys who engage but don't generate much movement. Unfortunately, the Raiders' current guards, like Dylan Parham and Jordan Meredith, fall into the latter category. While they may be decent backups, they aren't long-term solutions. To truly revamp the offensive line, the Raiders need players who can open up lanes in the run game and protect the quarterback. A potential solution could be drafting a right tackle with the 6th overall pick, sliding DJ Glaze inside to one guard spot, and signing Becton to play the other. That would give the team a completely reworked and much stronger offensive line heading into next season. Beyond the offensive line, another key area the Raiders must address is the running back position. One intriguing free agent option is Najee Harris. Harris, who grew up near Oakland, born in Martinez, attended school in either Pittsburgh or Antioch, could be an excellent addition to the Raiders' offense. At 6 feet 1 inch and 245 pounds, Harris is built to withstand the wear and tear of the NFL, and at just 26 years old, his best football is likely still ahead of him. Despite playing behind an inconsistent Pittsburgh offensive line, he has shown steady improvement. If placed behind a well-built offensive line in Las Vegas, Harris could thrive. Harris would likely cost somewhere between $6 to $12 million per year, probably on the lower end of that range. Given the Raiders' available cap space and flexibility, he could be a valuable addition. A strong offensive line paired with a powerful back like Harris would allow the Raiders to establish a dominant ground game, which would be critical in taking pressure off the quarterback, whoever that may be. Ultimately, the Raiders have plenty of options. With smart moves in free agency and the draft, they can significantly improve both their offensive line and rushing attack, setting the team up for success in the coming seasons. I want to take a step back and say this. I firmly believe the Raiders should draft 2 running backs in this upcoming draft. Given the depth and talent in this year's class, this strategy makes the most sense. This is arguably the best running back class we've seen in years, with 10 to 12 prospects who could have a real impact in the NFL. The Raiders could target 1 running back in the second or third round and then pick up another in the fourth or fifth round, ensuring they add both depth and talent to the backfield. While drafting a running back is the ideal route, signing a veteran free agent could also be a smart move. 2 names I would strongly consider are Aaron Jones and Nick Chubb. Both have had successful careers, though Chubb is coming off an injury and will be 29 years old. That said, he has proven to be an elite back in the past, and if the Raiders can get 1 or 2 solid seasons from him, similar to how the Vikings utilized Aaron Jones last year, it could be a worthwhile short-term investment. A 1 or 2 year team-friendly contract for either of these backs could provide immediate stability while the younger running backs develop. Looking at the Raiders' current running back room, I don't see anyone worth keeping as the primary ball carrier. Zamir White, Alexander Madison, and Amir Abdullah are serviceable depth pieces, but not feature backs. Abdullah could remain as a third down specialist, but White and Madison have not shown enough to warrant significant carries. The Raiders must improve at this position, and drafting 2 rookies in the early to mid rounds could provide them with their future playmakers. It's important to remember that a team's best offensive weapon doesn't always have to be a wide receiver or tight end. It can be a running back, especially on a rookie contract. The key is to pair them with a strong offensive line. Moving on from Josh Jacobs wasn't the mistake. The real issue was failing to replace him with another capable back and not revamping the offensive line to support the running game. If the Raiders fix these areas, they can have a much more balanced and effective offense. Beyond the running back position, there are a few other key areas the Raiders need to address. Right tackle is a priority, as well as guard, wide receiver, and possibly defensive tackle. If the Raiders can improve in these positions, whether through free agency or the draft, while also figuring out the quarterback situation, they should be in a strong position moving forward. Despite what some may say, the Raiders already have a solid core of players. Brock Bowers is one of the most talented tight ends in the league. Jackson Paris-Johnson is among the best young centers. Jacoby Myers and Michael Mayer may not be elite number 1 options, but they are strong number 2 weapons. On defense, Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby are top 10 players at their positions, while Malcolm Kuntz and Adam Butler have the potential to be top 15 pass rushers. Additionally, defensive coordinator Patrick Graham runs an excellent scheme that maximizes the talent on the roster. The Raiders are not far from being a competitive team. With a few key additions in free agency and the draft, especially at quarterback, offensive line, and running back, they can put themselves in a great position to succeed.